Cenat said African Americans have no culture, and that's not the most interesting thing to me at all. We should really do some research between the pipeline of black men influencers or content creators who are popular and deemed funny, even if they're not comedians, but like at first they start out funny and genuine and everyone loves them because they seem to be a genuine guy, like King Batch or whatever, and then slowly, little by little, they start promoting and perpetuating like stereotypes that are harmful to the black community, like until that becomes their entire personality. Because it would be tragic if people start basically associating Cenat's kind of like content with King Batch's, because no one likes King Batch's content. Going back to the prior statement, however, I can tell you for sure that even though I never went out of my way to see Cenat, whenever I saw him, I never knew that he was Caribbean. I never knew that he was in fact Haitian. His father being Haitian and his mother being from Trinidad. Out of all the times I've seen Cenat on my For You page, I have never once seen him promote Haitian culture as something he's directly part of. I've always seen him dibble-dabble in other people's cultures, and when I saw him talk about Haitian culture, I would assume that he was not Haitian himself. Because everything he seems to know about certain cultures is very limited and probably on a surface level, and while we can blame the parents or whatever, he's a grown man with money and resources. He can learn if he wanted to. So that being said, for a guy who dibble-dabbles in other people's culture and seems to be disconnected from his own two Caribbean cultures, he seems to have a lot of opinions about a culture that he consistently takes advantage of every day. And when we're talking about African American culture, what do you think we're talking about? We're talking about everything, right? Look at the clothes he wears. Look at how he talks. Look at his hair. Look at the people he's invited on his stream. You say African Americans have no culture, yet your styles come from them. You say African Americans have no culture, yet your favorite artists and musicians are African American. Your favorite genres of music was probably started by a black man in America, an African American. And while I'm not African American, so this is not going to hit me nearly as hard as it hits them, because they constantly have to deal with these anti-black remarks from other people, including other black people like Cenat.
So I'm hearing that the guy who did the live stream with Nicki Minaj, the young guy Cenat, said that black Americans have no culture. As a Caribbean girl who's born and raised here in the States, as someone who's traveled to 25 plus countries, baby, you was wrong. Guess whose culture, their customs, the way they dress, the way they talk, the way that the music that they made, like the traditions, are copied all over the world? The hairstyles, the looks. Guess who is copied and admired all over the world? Sit down, baby, be humble, because it's not Trini culture. It's not Haitian culture. It's not South African culture. It's not nobody. It's all black people. Of all the black people, black American culture is the most popular culture. Please stop.
Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, and today we are talking about Cenat, the popular Twitch streamer who has stirred up some serious controversy with his recent comments. So, he claimed that African Americans don't have a culture, and let's just say people are not letting that slide. Well, the internet is on fire with reactions and we are about to break it all down. Now, I have a few clips lined up where African Americans are responding to Kai's statement, so let's dive right in.
Cenat saying African Americans have no culture is not shocking to me in the slightest. However, it does bring up a point that I think about constantly when it comes to these like diaspora or culture wars, whatever you want to call it, is how come the buck stops with Caribbeans when it comes to culture. So often when Africans or Caribbeans say, oh, black Americans have no culture, and we start listing things from our culture, they start to say, oh no, well that's from our culture. Or like, who do y'all think y'all got that from? That's from us. And to Caribbeans, I want to say, no, that's from Africans. Like, all of your culture is also built off African culture, but you get to claim it as your own and we don't? I don't understand that. Because if you are black anywhere else in the diaspora, your culture is an amalgamation of different African cultures. You just put your own spin on it. Like wache, rice and peas, and red beans and rice are all pretty much the same thing, but they're different because of where we are in the diaspora. And those are all foods that are part of our own culture. Like whenever African Americans mention hairstyles, other black people in the diaspora are so very quick to remind us that like they started those hairstyles, even though black Americans have put their own significant twist on a lot of the hairstyles that come from Africa. But it's like, okay, if you're gonna say you can't gatekeep that comes from us, why do we only get that critique and not Caribbeans? Like, we are literally just a boat stop apart. I think what it boils down to is not living in a predominantly white society, because other black people in the diaspora simply don't get how it feels to live in a culture that simultaneously criticizes you for your own culture, but also steals it from you constantly. Like, there are little black boys getting their hair cut off at school while white people are letting their hair mat just because it's fun and they like the look. The things that we create are popularized, commercialized, and stripped from their origins, so much so that so many people forget that we started that shit. That's ours. We don't get to keep anything that's ours for very long. And so because it's not preserved, it's not seen and respected the same way that other people's cultures are. And it's not seen that way and respected because we are Black living in a predominantly white society. So Kai Cenat is going to continue to profit off of African American culture because he believes it's pop culture. Because people don't see AAVE as being something that is ours. Because people don't see rap as being something that is ours. Because people don't see our dances as ours. They see it as pop culture. This is just what Americans do. But no, it's what Black Americans do. And we started that shit. It is ours.
Well, I kind of understand why some people will feel like Black Americans don't have culture. Or should I say, they don't understand Black American culture, especially if you're not from here. Because I think what people fail to realize is that United States is a very, very, very large country. And what I mean by that is when people travel from country to country to get different cultural experiences, we can do that in the United States. So there's not one set of standard rules for Black American culture, because each state with a heavily Black population will have a different experience. We gather those experiences through each state. Of course, if you're in a city that's influenced as what we call a melting pot, more than likely you're not going to understand what Black culture is, simply because the influences that are around you are from the melting pot. But again, when you visit southern states like Atlanta, Mississippi, Louisiana, places that are heavily populated with Black Americans, you would then start to see the culture, the food, the way people dress, music, values, so on, and so on. I think instead of saying that Black people don't have culture, it would be better to say that you haven't identified it yet. I think that will come off just a little bit better.
Okay, so a lot of people were like offended by what Kai Cenat or whatever that random dude's name is on the internet, some internet famous guy, what he said about Black Americans being uncultured. You know, we don't, the classic bullshit of, you know, Black people not having any culture. But here's the thing, guys. What I'm realizing is that when people say stuff like that, this is what they're actually saying. What they're really saying is that our culture does not mimic what they're used to, like culture actually being or culture actually representing. So we're not a tribal people, right? So most of the times when people think of culture, they think of like tribal like cultures, tribal like traditions or things like that. And Black Americans in America, we're not a tribal people, right? We never developed a tribal culture. That's not who we are. That's just not how we do culture, right? We don't do culture the same way that everybody else does it, okay? So when they're looking at us and they're not finding anything that resembles tribal like traditions or tribal like culture, it would appear that we are not a cultured people. And you know, this is a massive country, like with a melting pot country full of different types of people, right? So because as we are going through generation to generation, we have always sort of lived underneath the rule of our oppressor, right? The people that brought us over here and, you know, enslaved us, and, you know, we went through the Jim Crow era and all that stuff. So we've always sort of lived underneath our oppressor. Whereas most of the people who are talking about us being uncultured live in countries where everybody sort of shares the same phenotype and they have their own country to themselves where they make all the rules. You know, everything is however they want it to be and nobody's standing over their necks. Nobody is telling them what to do. It's a free for all for them to do whatever they want in their country. So the way that they develop their culture and their traditions and is only unique to them because they don't have to worry. They never really had to worry about anybody else being on their necks. Whereas with us, we spent a good portion of our years, fleeing the KKK and building up communities only for them to be destroyed by our own government through bombs. And, so we have had a foot on our neck, ever since we've been here. Okay, so it would appear that we really just don't have culture because we haven't developed it in the same way that they did. You know, we had more important things to be worried about. Like even when you look at like Latin America or like the Caribbean, they have like the carnival or like certain traditional like dances that are like they've been doing for hundreds of years, I guess, or whatever, and certain garb that they wear, traditional style garb, like that they would wear like in traditional type ceremonies and things like that, which is still very much tribal like. That's what I'm talking about tribal like culture. And we don't do that here. That is not something that we do. We've never developed anything like that. You know, I think that they have a hard time wrapping their head around culture that doesn't look like what they define in their mind as culture. So it's not that we don't have a culture. What they're really trying to say is that our culture isn't familiar, that our cultural style just isn't familiar to them.
So I just seen Kai Cenat said Black Americans don't have any culture, and I'm just laughing because I'm not shocked. Because Akon said the same thing. And if you look at Akon's biggest hits, look at the featured artists on those hits and tell me what their nationality is. See what I'm saying? I say all that to say this. Nothing shocks me anymore. Absolutely nothing.
So here's the thing. I don't know what Kai was thinking when he said that, but to say African Americans don't have a culture, well, that's wild. Because Black American culture is everywhere. From music to fashion, language, and even the way people move and talk. The influence is undeniable. And what's even more interesting is that people from other cultures recognize it more than their own do. Hip-hop alone is a billion-dollar industry, and it started in Black American communities. The same goes for jazz, R&B, soul food, even slang. So much of what people consume daily comes straight from African American culture. Now, I'm not saying Kai meant to be disrespectful. Probably he did, probably he did not, but this whole situation just highlights a bigger issue, and it shows how some people fail to see the richness and depth of Black American contributions. So guys, what do you think about this whole situation? Drop your thoughts in the comments and let me know what you think. And of course, don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more trending stories. See you in the next one. Bye.